Hello again, and thank you for clicking to watch this video. Um, as the title says, China is kind of kicking our ass, really. And I know nobody wants to hear that, and it's sort of like the whole 1980s vibe of Japan can't innovate, they're just iterative, they just improve what's already there. And China, the vibe for a good 15, 20 years now has been kind of the same thing. They can't really innovate. They don't design anything, or they just build cheap, junky shit. Well, that's not quite the case anymore, really. But before we get into all that, I would like, if you can, to hit like and subscribe. Maybe place a comment down below. Liking the video doesn't cost anything. Subscribing doesn't cost anything. And, just makes everybody feel good inside. And before we jump into all that, I do need to talk about the AI bubble, as that is a big thing. We are obviously in an AI bubble, and this does tie into China leapfrogging us in a lot of advanced technologies. We are there, news article after news article. I mean, you could just see it right here. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So this is just a screen recording. This is just the news articles from my phone, just typing in, are we in an AI bubble? And as you can see, speculation is rampant, obviously, that we're in an AI bubble. And it kind of does feel that way, right? I mean, I don't know, but if you're of a certain age, you might remember the dot-com bubble, where websites that truly offered nothing, like pets.com, or that's the most egregious one. It's a commonly used example, but just simple websites that really didn't offer any e-commerce or anything else or any functionality were getting millions of dollars in investment. This is kind of the same thing. Anything AI or an AI company or vibe coding or vibe this or vibe that is getting billions of dollars of valuation. Just people are throwing cash at these companies the minute they see the word AI. And that is that is honestly almost exactly what it felt like in the late 90s. If you had a passing familiarity with HTML, you could get massive amounts of investment thrown your way. And then, of course, the bubble burst. And yeah, it took Facebook, I guess, to bring us back from that type of disaster, and Amazon and a few other websites that are pretty much massive monopolies today. So that being said, if we're in an AI bubble, what is another kind of evaluation of that? Well, obviously bubbles burst, and I think the trick is to timing when that is, because that's the whole shorts game. You can make a lot of money when a bubble bursts, just like you can make a lot of money when the bubble inflates, kind of like the housing bubble, the real estate bubble in the mid 2000s. However, I think when you couple the tariffs with the AI bubble, with all the other unrest that's going on in the United States, then you are really setting it up for a perfect storm of suck for all of us. And that's not anything we voted for. I don't think anybody voted for that. People who voted for Trump voted for things other than, well, they voted for the economy, let's face it. And it's not going the way they expected. So his poll numbers on the economy are something like 70%, 75% disapprove of his handling of the economy, which is just stunningly awful numbers. Really historic. There's never been a presidency, maybe Hoover. Hoover might have had worse economic job approval numbers. I mean, they did name homeless encampments after him, Hoovervilles. that's beside the point. That is definitely off topic. But another indicator that we might be in an AI bubble is the fact that all this big, beautiful bill and the big thing about the tariffs was to bring manufacturing back into the United States. And there are provisions in the big, beautiful bill that are actually really good for jumpstarting domestic manufacturing or advancing domestic manufacturing, making it more high tech, increased robotics. Those are all things that are in that bill, but they're not being utilized because AI is sucking all the oxygen out of the room. And here is a article that kind of explains that and what we are dealing with. All right, so here's an article that essentially puts a cherry on top of the AI valuation bubble that we're in. Because essentially, without AI and without this bubble, the GDP growth in the first half of 2025 was just 0.1%. That is stunningly bad. That is saying that without these massive data centers, the GDP was almost in negative growth, which is, as everybody knows, a recession. But for the first half of the year, that is awful. So when you get down into the numbers here, you can see technically, as Furman notes, investment in information processing equipment and software was only 4% of US GDP for the first half of 2025. Yet, it also accounted for fully 92% of GDP growth over that period. Furman added, it's probably not the case the US economy would have recorded almost no expansion at all absent this build out, reasoning that absent the AI boom, we would probably have lower interest rates and electricity prices, thus some additional growth in other sectors. And what he's saying, without coming out and saying it, is that the AI boom and all these data centers are not only increasing our electrical bills, which is driving down everybody's disposable income. When we don't have disposable income, we don't spend it. So that is a drag on the economy. But what Furman is also saying is that essentially all the Fed actions and a lot of the other interest rates and everything else that's going on, again, are being delayed because of the AI boom. So the AI boom is choking out other sectors of the economy. So again, it's not just a boom that is going to bust. It's also artificially deflating other sectors of the economy. So there's an article in Telegraph that talks about how Western executives who visit China are coming back absolutely terrified because China has invested heavily, I do mean heavily, in robotics to the point where they have leapfrogged us and they're putting into service almost 10 times the number of robots, manufacturing robots specifically, than Western economies have. And just go on here, that China now leads the world in the installation of industrial robots with a record number of active robots in its factories. In 2024, the country installed nearly 300,000 robots, more than the rest of the world combined. They're also innovating quite heavily in the capabilities of robotics. China has a massive lead in the number of active industrial robots and installing new ones at a much faster rate than the United States. So then this, as is very self-evident, ties into the idea that the AI boom is preventing us from actually revamping our factories to try to compete. Also, that we can search and ask what we can build out of the ingredients that are in our fridge. I don't think it's a good trade-off. Well, anyway, let me know what you think. Please hit like and subscribe, and talk to you later.